Hello, we're Molly Mish. After 10 years exploring all there is to see in US, Canada, and Mexico, we built a camper out of a 4-wheel drive Mercedes Sprinter van and headed across the pond to continue our journeys in Europe. After enduring year-long self-imposed isolation in Croatia during the height of the pandemic, we are ready to resume our European adventures. This summer, we're headed to the Irish and British Isles, starting with the Republic of Ireland. Join us as we explore and discover the magic of the Emerald Isle. It's been raining off and on. The sheep are still out there though. I guess they have nowhere to go. They don't have a van to go hide in.
They don't look like they have any shelter.
Yeah, I don't even know where the farm is that they're from. Alright, we're gonna keep packing up and get out of here. Not sure where we're going today.
Maybe a castle?
Maybe a castle. Maybe a harbor. Maybe a town.
Yeah.
Definitely someplace to go empty our toilet because one of them's full.
Yeah, I think we have
After a
4
couple
bags
days.
of trash too, so we need to.
Okay.
That's the hard part. I got to bring it in. It's gonna be a little wet.
Put on the step. Oh, yeah, you have 2 already there.
Yeah, 2 outside.
Okay. Alright, it's exactly 12 o'clock noon. We got a big early start today.
Like usual.
As usual. We're leaving this spot after 2 nights. It was a pretty good spot to be for 2 nights. It was very windy though, both nights, but not as windy during the day. So I don't know if that's good or bad. The kids think it's bad because they had a hard time sleeping. With the van was really rocking back and forth a lot last night with all the gusty winds. But today we were gonna go to Cork, but instead we're gonna make a quick detour up to the town of Cashel to visit the Rock of Cashel, which is a medieval castle. We're gonna go check that out before we get too far from here, because I think that is one of the heritage sites that we're supposed to go see. Unfortunately, you know, with today's conditions, it is only open in the exterior. You can only walk around the outside, which is fine with us. It's better than seeing nothing, but that's the downside. The upside of that is that there's no entrance fee. It's free, but you do have to reserve a ticket still. So I just did that on my phone through their website, and we have a appointment there. Our visit is scheduled for 2 p.m. so we have 2 hours, about an hour to get there. We'll just spend an hour like walking around, depending on what the weather looks like, and go visit it at 2 o'clock, and then after that drive back down to the coast somewhere near Cork. That's the plan. A little bit of a detour from what we were planning to do today, but we were planning to just go to Cork and really do nothing else because the weather is kind of bad. But I think this is just the kind of weather you're gonna have on a regular basis, so you can't be picky. We just gotta make do with what we got. We are now at the Rock of Cashel, which is a historic site here in Ireland. Not on the coast, maybe about an hour inland from the southern shore of Ireland. We have a 2 o'clock reservation for outside self-guided tour, which is about 7 minutes from now. So we're gonna go in there and check it out. We don't know really anything about it, so come along and learn with us. It's 450 euros to park for the whole day. First 20 minutes free, but yeah, you're not gonna get in and out of this place in under 20 minutes. So we'll be paying the 450. But what's nice is that it is free right now. Usually it costs money for the full tour, but right now you can only tour the outside, so you can't go inside. So the upside of that is it's free. It doesn't cost anything. We're over here. Like I said, it's not a very big town. Oh no, we're over here. This is the parking area we're at. So we're gonna leave. We're gonna go check out the Rock of Cashel, and then this is the town. I guess we'll just walk around the town afterwards.
No drones, Daddy.
Okay, no drone.
No high heels.
So here would normally be the inside tour, but you can't go in there. So just the outside.
Is it cost money for a guided? You want a guided tour?
Sure, yeah, we don't know anything about it.
Sure. My name is Marlene.
I'm Mary, so hello. We don't wear masks given tours. Up to yourselves if you want to wear them. It's outdoors. Everything is outdoors, so it's like I said, it's up to yourselves. Now the tour will take about 30 minutes, maybe 35. We don't encourage questions on it because we're under a time constraint, but I hang around at the end. So if anyone has any questions, I can do it then. Okay. And just to let you know, that the most common question actually up here from people is where's the rock? You know, they don't realise they're standing on it. This is the rock. What you climbed is the Rock of Cashel. The buildings only crown the rock. And yeah, it's an outcrop of limestone. It's sufficiently unusual in the Irish landscape. You're not Irish. No, you are.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. You know yourselves, you don't see something like this very often in Ireland. It's a huge outcrop of limestone that's attached to the underlying bedrock. Actually, 6,000 years ago, when they started using this, it was twice the size it is today because they cannibalized all the buildings from it.
Right.
Yeah. So that they're all actually part of the rock. They quarried half of the face away. And in the year 370, we had the first form of, written, I suppose, recorded history here when the kings of Southern Ireland, kings of Munster, based this as their capital. And they built a circular fortress. Sorry. They built a circular fortress out of unmortared stone and wood. That's where the word Cashel comes from. And it was the seat of the kings. Most famous king ever was crowned up here, Brian Boru. Yeah, in 977. Hello.
Hi, we're Germany.
Right, where are you from?
Belgium.
Ah, lovely.
You guys missed everything, by the
Let's just start over.
Can you recap? Did you pay attention?
You
I'll tell you
didn't
later.
miss much. Seat of the kings from the year 370 up until 1101. Okay, that's all you missed really.
Okay.
And now I've forgotten where I was. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So what happened was in 1101, it's a tiny bit complicated. We initially had the McCarthys up here who were kings. They reigned from 370 to 976. They were replaced then by Brian Boru, by the O'Briens, who reigned from 976 up until 1101. And in 1101, Brian Boru's great grandson, Murtagh, he was making a bid for the high kingship of Ireland. You see, what you had in Ireland, you people know this, but we had 5 provinces. Munster, Ulster, Leinster, Connacht and Meath. And each of those 5 provinces would vote to have an over-king, who was the High King of Ireland. And Murtagh O'Brien wanted to be the High King, but he realised that was he to abandon the site, it would have meant the McCarthys would have come back up here. He couldn't have that happen. So what he did was, he gave the rock in its entirety to the Irish Church. That's why you've got a collection of 5 church buildings up here today. There's only one building from the time of the kings. That's the Round Tower. The other buildings like the cathedral, the castle, the chapel, the vicar's choral, these range in date from the 12th to the 15th centuries. And it became the seat of an archbishop. And we had no archbishops in Ireland before then because we didn't have the Roman Church. We weren't invaded by Rome. So we had our own form of non-hierarchical Christianity called the Celtic Church. And then in 1111, when this was given to the church, Rome appointed the first ever archbishop. That was here in the Rock of Cashel. One was appointed at the same time in Armagh, up in Northern Ireland. And then, of course, Tuam and Dublin became the third and fourth archdiocese 40 years later. And it was a Catholic, and it was initially Catholic, and then it was Protestant, then it was Catholic, and it was Protestant. It changed hands on several occasions. But in the year 1749, the last ever archbishop installed in that cathedral, Arthur Price, who was living in the centre of the town. Have ye been downtown yet? No, if you're going downtown, you'll see a construction site for the Cashel Palace Hotel. That's going to be a 6-star hotel. That was originally the home of the Archbishop of Cashel. And it's also famous for the fact, and no Irish people know this, that it's the birthplace of Guinness. Yeah, the first pint of Guinness was brewed in the centre of town here for the same Archbishop who decided he didn't want to walk up the hill to celebrate service. So he had an Act of Parliament passed called the Cathedrals Act, which stated that any cathedral with a roof be subject to tax. So he came back down to Cashel and he stripped the roof from the finest Gothic cathedral in Ireland. He tore the roof off that building, and by doing so, he ruined the entire site.
And why did he strip the roof?
It said he didn't want to pay the tax. Well, he didn't. You've got to remember, back in those days, England was at war with the Americas. So they taxed everything to get revenue in. Like, you heard they had window taxes, chimney taxes, roof taxes. Yeah.
Well, the war in America is over taxes too.
Here, do you know, sometimes some things never change. But that's the beauty of history, except we're sort of doomed not to learn from it. But anyway, that there now, that's St. Patrick's Cross. Actually, I think I'll take off the cap. It's starting to get warm. I had to dig that out. It's probably smell of mildew from it. That is a concrete replica. That's only a copy. The original is in the cellar down here. I can't bring you in because of COVID restrictions. And the original cross dates from 1155.
Well.
You're all familiar with the Celtic cross, with the wheel? Yeah. This is actually an Italian cross. And it doesn't have the wheel. Instead, it used to have 2 pillars. They came from the base on either side. That one was since hacked off. And these pillars were said to have been the representations of the thieves or revolutionaries who were crucified at either side of Christ on Calvary. Now, we have Christ on this face, we have St. Patrick on the other face, and you've all heard of St. Patrick. Yeah. He's our patron saint in Ireland. I bet ye didn't know either that he didn't bring Christianity to Ireland. That's a myth. There were already Christians in Southern Ireland. This is why he went up north. And on his way up north, he stopped at Cashel and baptized the pagan king, whose name was Angus. And it said that during the baptismal ceremony, Patrick, who had this, the bishop's crook or staff, he leaned against it for support. And by doing so, didn't he, inadvertently drive the sharpened point of the crozier through the foot of the king. And the poor king, believing it to be an essential part of a Christian ceremony, he suffered it all without comment. I always love to say we had brave men in Ireland back in the 5th century. Now, under the cross we have the stone said to have been the coronation stone of the kings of Munster. It never was. And there's a tradition that says that if anyone here can wrap their arms like this around the base of the cross, meeting their fingers like this on the other side, that if they manage to do that successfully, not only have they extraordinarily long arms, but they'll never again have a toothache. And also, if you can hop on one foot 3 times around the base of the cross here, going in a clockwise direction, without stumbling or faltering, if you do that successfully, you'll be married within the year.
Okay, don't try to do that.
It doesn't actually work, because I've been hopping for decades. Now we're going over. Right, last building on the rock. It dates to 1235. Took 35 years to build. Gothic cathedral, you'll always know them, pointed arches. And I love seeing the expressions of French and Italian and German people when they come in here and we talk about our big cathedral, because this is actually tiny by European standards. But you have to remember something. When they were building this, the population of Ireland hadn't gone beyond 500,000 people on the entire island. So there was no point building big cathedrals because there was actually nobody here to use them. And this is why Irish cathedrals are built on a much smaller and much more intimate scale. Now look at the shape of the building. Can you see it's built in the shape of the cross? Head, body, arms. Transepts are the arms. And then you'll see there's something very, very wrong with this building. It's upside down. The head is 3 times the length of the body. And the reason why it's the wrong way up is quite simple. They had no space. They were building on a rock. What a lot of people don't realise, Irish people as well, is on these islands, Ireland and Britain, we have the tendency to bury our dead in graveyards as opposed to what you have on the continent, cemeteries. The difference, of course, is a graveyard is within the boundary walls of a church, whereas a cemetery isn't attached to a church. And the Irish state decided to change that because it's not good for built heritage. So they left a few places like the Rock of Cashel, Clonmacnoise, Glendalough open for burial, because we've been burying our dead up here since the 9th century. And in order to be buried on the rock, your name has to be on a register which was opened in 1930. Whosever name is in that has burial rights up here. And as far as I know, I think there are 2 ladies left to be buried on the rock. Right, now the Round Tower, that's the oldest building on the rock. To be honest, we don't quite know when it was built. There are no written records pertaining to it. And because the site was given to the church in 1101, that's the date they put on this round tower, because round towers were only ever built on religious lands. Except the last kings of Munster reigning up here, they were also bishops. And we know there was a graveyard here in the 9th century. And we know that there were other buildings here. And you always date a round tower on its doorway. And that doorway, just look at how simple, how primitive the arch is. The younger the round tower, the more elaborate the archway. This archway would state that it dates anything from 980 up to 1050. So, the Irish for round tower. Yeah, it's clig, teach. Clig or clog is bell, teach is house. And that's exactly what they were. They were bell towers, they were watchtowers, they were places of hiding. And they stored very valuable things in there. They used to have pegs in the walls and they'd suspend their leather satchels filled with gold objects, which were on certain feast days. They were displayed here on the lintel or the lip of the doorway. And the doorway itself was very high up. That doorway was originally 15 feet, 5 meters above ground level. And the reason being, round towers had a problem. They had little, if any, underground foundations. So had they built the doorway at ground level, the tower would have collapsed. So instead they built it high up, filled the base with crushed rock rubble, and internally there were 5 wooden floors or stories which were interconnected by wooden ladders. And they were death traps. You learned that at school as well. Yeah. We have a thing in Ireland, a series of diary entries called the Annals of the Four Masters. And they describe in quite a bit of lurid detail how a number of kings, bishops and abbots were burned alive within them. And what would happen was invaders would sweep down on these sites. The monks would take refuge in the round tower. 99% of the time they were fine, but you always had the 1% who wanted what the monks had. So they stacked peat and turf up against the base. The monks would have waited in horror while everything was set alight, and if they were lucky, they died from smoke inhalation. If they were really unlucky, they burned alive because the round tower had a wooden door. And once that wooden door ignited, look at the shape of the building. So not a nice place to be caught on a bad day, but I don't care because I think they're fabulous. because they're the only building we have in this country that is 100% ours. That's the only indigenous building in Ireland. We have 70 of them still standing. You'll only find round towers in Ireland. Yeah, I always say that because we tend to forget the two in Scotland and the one in England. But it doesn't matter about them because they were built by Irish monks anyway. And there's one in Belgium. Yeah, built from Tipperary stone at one of the First World War battlefields. But I often we give guided tours at the moment to 15 people max. Now normally you'd be given a guided tour up here to over 100 people. And there's always somebody who will sort of say, sorry, excuse me, you know the way you say you'll only find round towers in Ireland? And I go, yeah, because I know what's coming. Well, I'm from Italy or I'm from Norway and we've got really big round towers. And I go, you do, yeah, but you don't have an Irish round tower. And the difference is when you go over there, turn around, look back up at the roof of that building. It's a conical cap that's made from stone, and that's what makes our round towers unique. Aren't they just fabulous? That's over 1,000 years old. It's still standing. And I can tell you something else. We would not have the skill today to build something like that. And when you think it was built with a piece of string and no mortar, they were just wonderful people. Now we're going around this way, we'll finish the tour. I'm just going to do a little stop here. I hope you don't mind if I run about 5 minutes over time because I'm going to there's a lot of non-Irish people on this tour. And we have two people here from Roscommon. Complete magical landscape. Anytime I drive through it, I'm just constantly reading the landscape because it's just full of megalithic, really Stone Age ancient monuments. So I just want to show you something that is very special, very Irish. You've got hundreds, thousands of them up in Roscommon. You see the trees on the top of that hill? That's a fairy fort. Yeah. You all know what fairy forts are? Yeah, well, for those who don't know, I'm going to tell you. Fairy forts are where the fairies live. They're the most Irish things ever, apart from round towers. And the reason I said Roscommon is, you see, back in pre-Christian times, we're going back to the Stone Age, megalithic. Right through until the 11th century, the Irish didn't live in towns. We lived in what are today the fairy forts. We have 60,000 recorded fairy forts in Ireland. 27 of them are here in Cashel. That one is very special because that was actually a wood henge around 1500 BC. Now the Irish, instead of living in towns, they lived in circular enclosures called raths or leas. And depending on how important the person or the clan was in this lea, they had anything from 1 to 4 concentric boundary walls. 4 meant a king lived there. And what happened was, in the 9th, actually more than 9th century, the Vikings came to Ireland. And we're all familiar with their longboats, and they were able to navigate up our narrow rivers right into the heart of the country, and they murdered and they pillaged. But they bought us 2 things we didn't have. They bought us currency, and they bought us the idea of urban development because they built trading posts on the rivers. And what happened was the Irish started to move or leave their leas or their rats, and they moved to these trading posts to become the cities of Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Waterford. They're all Viking cities. So all of these fairy forts were left empty, and that's when the fairies moved in. And yes, the fairies do exist. They're the traditional people of Ireland. We're all familiar in Ireland with the Tuatha Danann and the Firbolgs and the Partholonians, the original races of this country. The Tuatha Danann took over from the Firbolgs. They beat them. But the Tuatha Danann were generous. They said to the Firbolgs, okay, you're defeated, but what we'll do is we're prepared to divide this country into 2. Which part do you want? And the Firbolgs said, we'll take the underworld. And that's when they went down. And today they live in all of these forts all across the country. They are sacred spaces and they are portals to the other world. And if you visit them, you are not, every Irish person knows it, you cannot take anything with you. Now, we're going to finish the tour just over here. Right, now, Cormac's Chapel, that's the most important building on the site. Architecturally, it's the most important building in Ireland. Because we don't have a lot of Romanesque architecture in this country. I said at the beginning of the tour, we were never invaded by the Romans. So Ireland is very unusual for the fact that we developed our own form of Christianity because we could cherry pick. And so our churches were also very different. And a Celtic Christian church wouldn't have looked like this. It would have looked like, you see the top, that capstone on that cross there. I'm talking about this. You see that pyramid-like thing up there? That's what an Irish church would have looked like. They were very simple buildings with low walls, solid stone, no windows, one doorway at the western gable end, and they had these really tall stone roofs. That's what an Irish church looked like. And then what happened was, in 1124, remember I was telling you the McCarthys were the original kings up here, and they were replaced by the O'Briens, and the O'Briens gave this to the church to make sure the McCarthys couldn't get back up. Yeah, well, in 1124, there was a McCarthy, and he was exiled to a monastery in Lismore in County Waterford, and he got the call from the High King of Ireland to get back up to Cashel because he was going to be crowned King of Desmond. So, once again, you had a McCarthy king on the rock. And which better way to show the O'Briens who was back in town than to build this? Cormac McCarthy had been educated in Germany. He brought in German Mason monks, French, English and Irish, all Masons. They went to work, created this. The year was 1127. It took 7 years to build, was finished by 1134. It's tiny. It's a royal chapel. Would only have been used by the royal family. It is known as the Golden Chapel for obvious reasons. I'll tell you about the stone in a minute. But to give you an idea of its importance, actually, I was just saying to you about the Celtic church. This has one thing in common, a solid stone roof. And you can't see it you'll see it from over there. The roof is an engineering masterpiece. That is called Corbel vaulting. You'll see it in the passage tombs at Newgrange. It was a certain way the Irish built with stone. And yeah, very, very unusual. The chapel itself is very important in terms of European architecture because it's Hiberno-Romanesque. So it's a mixture of the native Irish stone roof church with that of the continental Romanesque tradition. I love the word Hiberno, Hibernia, Latin name for Ireland. This is what the Romans called us. Do you know what it translates as? The land of never-ending winter.
Nice.
Yeah, you all understand the irony. By the way, we're standing on a 9th century graveyard here. When they excavated under the chapel in 1994, they discovered the wooden post holes from a 6th century and a 9th century church, and more 9th century bones under the chapel as well. Now the stone, sandstone, and by the way, Romanesque, you can see it. It's repeated everywhere. Like you've got the rounded arches. They couldn't have, with a stone roof, they couldn't have windows. So they created, well, they didn't, but it's a Moorish, a North African feature called blind arcading. Gives the illusion of airiness and light. The chapel internally is very, very dark. It's a pity I can't bring you in. We have 12th century frescoes in there from 1170. Now they're very fragmentary because we don't have the climate in Ireland for them. There's a beautiful Viking Irish tomb in there as well. And yeah, the stone is sandstone taken from a quarry 15 miles north of Cashel. It's Devonian, so it's a very unusual type of golden sandstone. But therein lies the problem, because sandstone is not the right stone for this climate. You know, and another thing, I always like to bring some sort of social history in, because I feel that medieval people were very misunderstood. You know, we tend to look down our noses at them today. But, you know, the limestone buildings there, that took 35 years to build using pretty crude chisels. And they were breathing in lime dust all the time. They were breathing in sandstone all the time. They were dead within 10 years. Anyone who worked on this chapel, their lungs would have been ripped to pieces by silica. Their tools were constantly being blunted on the sandstone. So this was a really expensive job. And the sandstone has let in water over the centuries. Now that chapel, back in 1985, was totally waterlogged. So in 1986, the state decided to rescue it. They uncovered the frescoes. That took 17 years because they were covered in 27 coats of whitewash. they uncovered those, tried to stabilise the internal microclimate. That didn't work, so they had to dry the chapel out. Some people might have seen photos of the rock with this hideous scaffolding, and that surrounded the chapel for 9 years, during which time water didn't get at it, so the walls were allowed to drain naturally. So they dried it out, then discovered that the roof was partially rotten, so the entire roof had to be taken off, all 1,500 stones. They were graded, 80% were saved, reinstated, 20% was new, and we often get asked, well, how did we waterproof it? We didn't. Do you remember I was telling you about the mortar back then? You use it to keep the buildings dry. It's the same principle. They mortared up the roof for the first time in its history. The water drains, anytime it rains, it drains into an irrigation system here and down into that bin before it can get at the mostly unmortared walls here. So it has been a hugely successful project, but yeah, when you consider that 10 years ago the entire interior was covered in black mould, you're standing there, the smell was just dreadful. You'd have mould in your hair. It was just awful. That today, they have a special floor gone down in there as well. They did a great job on it, and it's a pity I can't bring you in. I've already kept you way over time, so I'd just like to say thanks very much for listening to me. Hope you enjoyed the tour.
Yeah.
I certainly did, because it's just wonderful to talk.
Our tour guide was really knowledgeable. She's throwing out facts at us that it was just like a bunch of flashes of information that I had a hard time retaining, but I hope whatever I edit together in this video will kind of make sense, because I couldn't tell the Munsters from the McCarthys and any of the Irish history, being that we just don't know that much about it. But hopefully this is our one of our first heritage visits at some of these really old places, and hopefully by the time we're done visiting Ireland here, we'll have a really good idea about all of the history and all of the sites and what it's all about. But that was really cool. I'm glad we came. I suspect I'll be doing a lot of Wikipedia research later today. This is how you act normally when you're on camera. How does Ava act normally when she's on camera?
I didn't get my gummy bears.
Oh my gosh, you forgot?
No, I asked. You said no.
Oh, I gotta lock it. Okay. Mama, you said no to gummy bears? So we made it to the town of... What do you think the name of this town is pronounced? This is a spot that we were gonna come to this morning when we left. When we left the spot up in Mahone Falls, we were gonna come here, but instead we took a detour to go see Rock of Cashel, and it was well worth it. But we spent all day getting here, and by the time we got here, this place was completely full. This is a designated camper van parking spot. 10 euros a night. It has water, it has dump, it has a bathroom, just like a porta potty kind of thing. But it was totally full. Every spot was full. And you're supposed to be here for no longer than 48 hours. But I suspect some of these people are here for longer. There's a guy with a trailer who's got it like turned around and pushed in, like the hitch going forward. So that took a lot of effort. That took a lot of effort to get his trailer turned around and pushed into the spot. So I'm guessing these people are just here for a while, and there's probably not a lot of policing happening. In fact, we talked to one guy who was there, and that guy basically came out of his camper van and said, yeah, you can just park right there where we're parked, just on the side. not at a designated spot, because you're supposed to be at one of the number spots, and we're not in the number spot. So we were worried that, well, we're still worried that we might get in trouble. We might be asked to leave. And he said, I've been here 2 days. He's at a designated spot. But he said, I haven't seen anybody. I haven't even paid. So we're gonna pay, but we're not in the designated spot. So fingers crossed that things go well. But we're gonna walk. We're gonna walk down to this little waterfront trail that's along, you know, this little area. This is near the general sort of larger municipality of the town of Cork, and up here is a harbor where the Titanic made its last docking before it set across the Atlantic. So this would be the last port that the Titanic ever docked at before it sank into the North Atlantic. There's supposed to be a museum, but we're not gonna go inside. But there's some things to see. So I'll just show you, like, there's some kind of Titanic experience here at this town. I don't know what there is to see. Oh, is this made to look like the Titanic? Huh? Looks kind of boat-ish. Anyways, yeah, there's a lot of like Titanic specific tourism based stuff here. There's a mural over there that talks about the Titanic anniversary. So I'm guessing that's what people come to this town for, is to see Titanic stuff. So we'll see what we can see in the next half an hour or so before we come back, before the sun goes down, because it's supposed to rain again later. So we're just trying to squeeze in a couple more things before the end of the day. Let's hear Annie's story.
Hello, I'm Annie Moore. My claim to fame is that I was the first immigrant to be processed on Ellis Island, New York, on the morning the immigrant inspection station opened on the 1st of January 1892.
That's her.
I was born and raised in Cork City until the age of 17 when I departed from this port, Queenstown, on board the SS Nevada on the 20th of December 1891. My younger brothers and I were on our way to join our parents and older brother in New York. We travelled for 12 long days in steerage. When we arrived, I was the first off the ship at Ellis Island, and I was greeted with great fanfare. I became somewhat of a celebrity. If you would like to hear the full story of my life, and that of many other Irish immigrants who left from here before and after me, the Cove Heritage Centre directly behind you is the perfect place to visit. You will be fascinated by the great stories of Irish immigration from this port. Thank you for calling by, and enjoy your visit to Queenstown, or Cove as they call it now. God bless.
It's not open, so we can't go even if we wanted to. These colorful houses are like St. John's in Newfoundland. You guys don't remember St. John's? And then look at that church back there.